I still remember that searing moment as if it were a burst of lightning, 100 words of raw, unyielding truth that shattered the comfortable lie I'd built my life upon. I came home unexpectedly one cool autumn evening, only to discover a truth so devastating that it ripped through my soul. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, had given me an STD. In that split second, the life we'd carefully constructed, the late-night laughter, the shared dreams, and every whispered promise, crumbled into bitter ash. The evidence was undeniable, and in that horrifying instant, I knew I could no longer live a lie. For years, I had believed our marriage was a sanctuary, a space built on mutual respect, unwavering trust, and love that could weather any storm. I'd given everything to make it work, sleepless nights, financial sacrifices, and a relentless commitment to nurturing the bond we shared. I trusted her completely. We built a life together filled with routines that once brought comfort, Sunday brunches with friends, quiet evenings at home, and tender moments when she'd hold my hand and promise that nothing could break us apart. Yet, beneath the calm surface of our everyday life, there was an undercurrent of secrets, a hidden truth that had been festering in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal its devastating power. That moment came on an evening I had expected to be ordinary, a simple night when I returned home early from work to enjoy a quiet dinner together. The air was crisp, the sky painted in soft hues of dusk, and as I unlocked the door, a cold shiver ran down my spine, though I couldn't yet say why. The house was as I'd left it, silent and still, with only the gentle hum of the refrigerator for company. I had no inkling that my world was about to be upended. I stepped into our living room and glanced around, noticing little oddities, the absence of her cheerful greeting, the way her favorite mug sat undisturbed on the counter, the subtle emptiness in the space where our shared laughter used to echo. Then, as I passed the study, I heard a quiet conversation that shouldn't have been there. My heart began to pound faster. I followed the sound until I reached the partially open door and, through a narrow gap, I saw her seated at the desk with a pained expression. On the screen of her laptop, a medical report glowed, its bold letters and alarming statistics impossible to ignore. I edged closer, barely breathing, until I saw it clearly. The test result read positive next to the name of an STD that I had never even considered, one that now tainted not only my health but the trust one had placed in her. My mind went into overdrive. Every memory of her dismissing my concerns about her late nights, every time she brushed off my questions about unexplained absences, now lined up like a series of red flags I had ignored. I felt a sick, twisting pain in my stomach as betrayal and fear collided. I couldn't understand how the woman I had loved could hide such a secret that now threatened to destroy everything I held dear. Stunned and numb, I retreated to the solitude of our small kitchen, my eyes fixed on the medical report that confirmed my worst nightmare. The report was clinical and impersonal, a stark contrast to the intimacy I thought we shared. My thoughts spiraled. Had she been careless? Or had this been a deliberate betrayal? The realization was unbearable. My trust had been violated in the most personal way imaginable. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me, leaving me unmoored in a sea of doubt and pain. As the initial shock began to wear off, a surge of anger took its place, a burning fury that demanded answers. I recalled the countless times I had silently questioned her late nights and whispered phone calls, dismissing them as benign coincidences. Now, every unanswered question, every subtle hint, crystallized into a single, agonizing truth. She had been unfaithful, and the consequence of that betrayal was now inflicted upon me in a way that I could neither predict nor forgive. With trembling hands and a heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination, I knew that I had to confront this head-on. I couldn't continue living in the dark, nursing wounds that would only fester with silence. My mind raced as I debated my next steps. Should I wait, gather more evidence, or confront her immediately? The weight of that decision pressed down on me, each second stretching into an eternity of torment. I decided that I owed it to myself to seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I gathered every scrap of evidence I could find, the printout of the medical report, screenshots of late-night texts, and even the timestamps on our shared calendar that showed unexplained absences. With each piece of evidence, the mosaic of her betrayal became clearer, and I felt a cold resolve harden within me. This was not just a personal betrayal, it was an act of deception that had compromised every promise we had ever made to each other. The next few hours were a blur of silent tears and frantic planning. I locked myself in our study, the room now a prison of painful memories, and began to write in my journal. Each word was a desperate cry for clarity, a means of untangling the web of emotions that had suddenly overwhelmed me. I wrote of the love I thought we shared, the trust one had placed in her, and the devastating blow of discovering the truth in the most unexpected of places. My journal became a mirror reflecting every piece of the fractured relationship, a record of the moments that, in retrospect, had hinted at something amiss. As I wrote, I felt a transformation begin. The initial sting of betrayal, though still raw, was slowly giving way to a realization: I deserved better. I deserved to live a life where honesty and integrity were not just ideals, but the very foundation of every relationship I held dear. I vowed to myself that I would not allow this secret to destroy me. Instead, I would use it as the catalyst for reclaiming my life, for redefining my self-worth, and for forging a future built on truth and resilience. I knew that the coming days would be some of the most challenging of my life. The confrontation with my wife, the exposure of her betrayal to those around us, and the long, arduous process of rebuilding my trust in myself were all daunting prospects. But I also recognized that in order to heal, I had to face the pain head-on. I could no longer live in denial, pretending that everything was as it had always been. The truth was a bitter pill, but it was the only path to a future where I could be free of lies and deception. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with determination, I closed my journal and took one final, steadying breath. I stood up, squared my shoulders, and made a silent promise to myself: I would confront this betrayal, demand the truth, and reclaim every ounce of dignity that had been stolen from me. In that defining moment, as the room around me grew quieter and the soft light of dusk filled the space, I understood that my life was about to change irrevocably. I was no longer willing to be a victim of deception. I was ready to fight for the life I deserved, a life defined by my own truth, not by the lies of others. In the immediate wake of that public expose, my life unraveled into a chaotic mix of raw emotion and stark realization. The once festive atmosphere of our anniversary party had transformed into a surreal, frozen tableau of betrayal and disbelief. I remember stumbling out of the dining hall, heart pounding so fiercely it felt as though it might burst, while whispered murmurs and shocked gasps filled the space behind me. In that moment, I felt simultaneously exposed and invincible, a paradox that set the stage for the next phase of my journey. For hours after I had revealed the damning evidence on my phone, I wandered through our home as if in a daze. Every familiar object, the soft glow of the lamp in the corner, the scent of fresh flowers on the dining table, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, seemed tainted with the memory of that day. The happy faces of our friends and family, who had once shared in our celebration, now looked at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. I felt isolated, marooned in a reality where the life I had built was suddenly nothing but a series of lies and broken promises. The first wave of shock soon gave way to a relentless torrent of emotions. Anger surged like wildfire through me, an anger so intense it blurred my vision and made my hands shake. How could she, the woman I loved, betray me so openly? And even more devastatingly, how could my best friend, my confidant, the brother I never had, be complicit in her deceit? Every memory of shared laughter, every whispered secret from years past, now came flooding back with a bitter sting. I spent the rest of that night alone in our study, the glow of the computer screen throwing harsh shadows across my tear-streaked face as I replayed the evidence over and over. Each image, each text message, was a brutal reminder that the trust one had cherished was nothing but a fragile illusion. The following morning, I awoke before dawn, my body still trembling from the adrenaline of the previous night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring blankly at the ceiling as the reality of the betrayal settled into every fiber of my being. I felt as if I were caught in a limbo between who I had been and who I now had to become. That moment of public exposure had ripped away the mask of contentment I had worn for so long, leaving me raw and vulnerable, but also oddly empowered. It was the catalyst I needed to finally face the darkness and reclaim my identity. Unable to bear the silence, I reached out to a close friend, someone who had been my rock in better times, and poured out everything in a flood of tears and shattered words. I never thought it would come to this, I choked, describing the images and messages that had laid bare the secret affair. The pain in their voice matched mine, yet they offered a steady reassurance that I wasn't alone. Their empathy was a lifeline, and it stirred something deep within me, the realization that while the betrayal cut deep, it also offered a chance to rebuild from the ruins. I spent the next few days in a state of intense introspection. Every minute, every memory, was examined and dissected. I questioned my own naivete and the subtle signals I had ignored, a dismissive glance when I inquired about her whereabouts, an unexplained text sent in haste, the quiet moments when she seemed lost in thought. The mosaic of evidence was overwhelming, and I felt a raw need for answers that went beyond mere accusations. I needed to understand not just what had happened, but why. What led her to betray the sanctity of our marriage, and how had our shared life become so riddled with deception? These questions haunted me, propelling me into a desperate search for truth. I began gathering every scrap of information I could find, meticulously organizing emails, text logs, and social media interactions into digital folders. I wanted to create a timeline, a clear picture of when and how the infidelity had taken root. With each new file, the reality became even more undeniable. This was not a fleeting mistake or a momentary lapse, it was a prolonged, calculated betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight. The clarity of the evidence ignited a spark of fury within me, a burning need to confront the source of this deceit and demand accountability. That evening, I resolved that I would no longer let the betrayal fester in silence. I knew that confronting my wife would be one of the hardest moments of my life, but I also understood that the truth could no longer be buried beneath excuses and half-truths. I rehearsed my confrontation in front of a mirror, my reflection morphing with every impassioned word I practiced. I envisioned the scene, the tension in our living room, the shock on her face, the inevitable questions that would tear apart the fragile remnants of our shared history. I wrote down every question I needed to ask. When did it start? Who was he? Why had I been deceived? Each word was a piece of armor, fortifying me against the vulnerability I knew would come. Amid the chaos of planning and reflection, I sought the guidance of a therapist to help me navigate this tumultuous time. Dr. Ramirez, a compassionate and insightful counselor, helped me unravel the web of emotions that had tangled my heart. Anger is a natural response to betrayal, she explained gently during one session, but it's also a signal, a call to reclaim your self-worth and forge a path that honors the truth. You are not defined by her actions, but by the strength with which you rise from them. Her words resonated with me, offering a glimmer of hope that I could turn this devastation into a stepping stone for a future built on honesty and self-respect. Emboldened by therapy and the support of friends, I began to take deliberate steps toward reclaiming my identity. I opened a private journal dedicated solely to this journey, a space where I could chronicle every emotion, every revelation, and every small victory over the betrayal that had upended my life. With each entry, I began to see the transformation unfolding within me. I wrote about the anger that initially consumed me, the profound sense of loss, and gradually, the stirring of a newfound resolve. I realized that while the wounds of betrayal might never fully heal, they could serve as a reminder of my capacity to endure and rebuild. Every day, I felt the weight of the past slowly lighten as I focused on creating a new future for myself. I re-engaged with my work, channeling the raw energy of my heartbreak into innovative projects that reminded me of my own worth. I took on challenges that pushed me beyond the confines of what I had thought possible, and with each success, I reclaimed a small piece of the confidence I had lost. I even started a private blog, sharing my experiences with a community of readers who had faced their own betrayals. Their stories and words of encouragement were a powerful reminder that while pain was inevitable, healing was also possible, one step, one day, one honest truth at a time. The social fallout of the public expose was equally jarring. Friends and relatives, once part of the fabric of my daily life, began to treat me differently, some with pity, others with silent judgment. I found myself navigating a maze of conflicting emotions in gatherings that once brought joy. I began to withdraw, not out of a desire for isolation, but as a means of processing the overwhelming reality of what had been revealed. The betrayal was no longer just a private pain, it had become a spectacle, a public drama that forced everyone around me to confront the fragility of trust and the devastating impact of lies. Yet, as I faced the stares and whispers, I also discovered a deep, unyielding strength within me, a resilience that was born from the rawness of the experience. I realized that the public nature of the fallout, while painful, also held a certain power. It stripped away the pretense, leaving behind only the truth, however harsh it might be. I began to see that by exposing the betrayal to everyone, I was reclaiming my narrative, taking control of the story rather than letting the deception define me. That realization marked the beginning of a personal revolution. I made a vow to myself that I would no longer be a victim of deceit. I would confront the remnants of my broken trust with unwavering honesty. I started to set new boundaries in all my relationships, learning to value my own voice and to demand transparency from those I chose to let into my life. The journey was not easy, there were days when the old wounds would reopen, and the pain would surge back with a vengeance. But with every setback, I found new reasons to stand tall, to fight for the dignity I had long been denied. One rainy afternoon, as I sat by the window with a cup of steaming tea, I began drafting a letter, not to my wife, not to anyone else, but to myself. It was a letter of release, a cathartic outpouring of everything I had endured, and a declaration of my commitment to reclaim my life. I wrote of the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the enduring pain, but also of the spark of defiance that had grown within me, a promise that I would transform that pain into the foundation for a new beginning. Each word was a solemn vow, that I would not allow the lies of the past to dictate my future, that I would nurture my self-worth, and that I would rebuild my life on my own terms. That letter became a turning point, a silent manifesto that I returned to every time the memories threatened to overwhelm me. It reminded me that the truth, however devastating, was also a source of liberation. The painful exposure of my wife's betrayal was not the end of my story, it was the catalyst for a profound transformation. I began to view every tear, every moment of despair, as a stepping stone toward a future where I was in control, where my dreams were not stifled by deceit, and where my worth was defined solely by my own resilience. As the days turned into weeks, I found that my inner storm was gradually giving way to a calm determination. I embraced therapy, reconnected with supportive friends, and dedicated myself to projects that filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. I set concrete goals for my personal and professional life, and with every small victory, a successful work presentation, a kind word from a friend, a moment of creative inspiration, I rebuilt a fragment of my shattered identity. Now, as I stand on the cusp of a new chapter, I am filled with a quiet, steadfast resolve. I am no longer the man who was blindsided by betrayal. I am a man who has faced the darkest truths and emerged with a vision for a future that is entirely my own. The journey ahead will undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, days when the scars of the past will ache, nights when memories will surge like tidal waves, but I am prepared to meet them with the strength that has been forged in the fires of deception. In that final moment of reckoning, as I prepared to take the next step in reclaiming my life, I realized that the most powerful act of all was to own my truth. I would confront the betrayal, expose the lies for what they were, and in doing so, liberate myself from the shackles of a broken trust. I had come to understand that while the public fallout had been painful, it had also been a necessary catalyst for change, a brutal, honest mirror that forced me to see myself for who I truly was. With every heartbeat, I felt the promise of a new dawn, a dawn that would light the path to a future defined by honesty, resilience, and the unwavering belief that I deserved to be loved and respected for my true self. I resolved to rebuild my life piece by piece, to nurture the dreams that had been suppressed, and to forge relationships founded on mutual trust and genuine care. In the wreckage of betrayal, I discovered a strength that no one could ever take away, a strength that would guide me as I stepped into the uncertain, yet hopeful, promise of tomorrow. As I closed my journal that night and stared out at the starlit sky, I felt a deep sense of calm amid the chaos. I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but I also knew that I was ready. I was ready to reclaim my identity, to rebuild my future, and to live a life defined not by the pain of the past, but by the infinite possibilities of the new beginning I was determined to create. That night, as the echoes of my public exposé still reverberated in my ears and the haunting images of betrayal played in slow motion before my eyes, I knew that nothing could ever return to the life I once knew. In the cold, raw aftermath of exposing my wife's deceit, revealed in front of friends, family, and strangers, I found myself at a crossroads where the weight of my shattered trust met the burning desire to reclaim my identity. In the hours following the confrontation, I wandered the empty halls of our home like a ghost, the silence now filled with memories of laughter that once bound us together, now transformed into reminders of an intimacy betrayed. I sat alone in our study, the evidence of her indiscretions strewn across the desk, screenshots, photos, and messages that documented every secret encounter. Each piece of evidence was like a shard of broken glass, but as I looked at them, I realized that these fragments, painful as they were, could form the mosaic of my rebirth. I had been forced to face a truth that was more devastating than I ever anticipated, a truth that stripped away every comforting illusion and left only a stark, unvarnished reality. I spent that sleepless night scribbling in my journal by the dim light of a desk lamp. My pen moved feverishly, chronicling every burst of anger, every tear of anguish, and every flicker of defiance that had surged through me since I'd seen the damning proof. I wrote about the shattering moment at the party, the humiliation of realizing that the woman I loved had chosen a life of lies, and the soul-crushing betrayal of the friend I had once trusted implicitly. Each sentence was a catharsis, a bitter yet necessary rite of passage that allowed me to confront my inner demons and acknowledge the depth of my own pain. And as I wrote, something unexpected began to emerge amid the wreckage of my thoughts, a spark of clarity, a vision of a future that, although uncertain, was undeniably my own to create. In the days that followed, I made a conscious decision that I could no longer remain a prisoner of my past. The betrayal had taken so much from me, my trust, my illusions, even a piece of my heart, but it had also lit a fire within me, a burning resolve to rebuild my life from the shattered remnants of our shared history. I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. I would have to confront the fallout of a public revelation that had rocked not just my personal life but had sent shockwaves through our entire circle of family and friends. Yet, even as I braced myself for the inevitable storms of judgment and regret, I clung to the belief that truth, however painful, was the only path to liberation. I began by seeking the guidance of a trusted therapist, Dr. Marissa Lane, whose calm, steady presence became a lighthouse in the storm of my emotions. In our sessions, I unraveled the tangled threads of betrayal and loss. I recounted, in painstaking detail, the moments leading up to the exposé, the subtle shifts in her behavior, the hushed phone calls, the secretive glances that I had once dismissed as fleeting distractions. Dr. Lane helped me see that while the pain of betrayal was immense, it was also an opportunity to rebuild my identity from the ground up. Every scar tells a story, she told me one evening, and each one can become a symbol of your strength, if you allow it. You have the power to turn this devastation into a new beginning. Her words resonated deeply, and gradually, I began to see that the darkness I had endured was not the end of my story, it was a prelude to a rebirth. Emboldened by therapy, I took steps to reclaim my life in tangible ways. First, I separated my financial and legal ties from the chaos of the past. I contacted my lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce, a decision that, although painful, was liberating. I was no longer willing to be chained to a life built on deceit. Each document I signed, each form I submitted, was a small act of rebellion, a declaration that I deserved a future defined by honesty and self-respect. The legal process was grueling and fraught with moments that forced me to confront the reality of our broken marriage. Yet, with each step, I felt a measure of relief, as if I were shedding a weight that had long burdened my soul. Simultaneously, I began to rebuild my professional and personal identity. I immersed myself in my work with a vigor that surprised even me. I took on challenging projects, pitched innovative ideas, and worked late into the nights, channeling the raw energy of my heartbreak into creative expression. Every small success at work, every word of recognition from colleagues, became a reaffirmation that I was more than the sum of my shattered trust. My professional accomplishments gradually helped restore a piece of my self-esteem, offering a glimmer of hope that I could rebuild not only my life but also my sense of self-worth. Outside the realm of work, I rediscovered the power of creative expression. I returned to writing, to music, to the art that had once been my refuge. I poured my heart into a blog where I chronicled my journey, a raw, unfiltered account of betrayal, pain, and the slow, painful path to healing. The response from readers was overwhelming. Strangers reached out with stories of their own, their messages echoing the resilience and determination that I had come to embody. These shared experiences reinforced a vital truth. I was not alone, and the scars of my past, while painful, could serve as the foundation for a future defined by courage and authenticity. As autumn deepened into winter, I took a solitary trip to a quiet mountain retreat. There, amid the crisp air and the stark beauty of snow-capped peaks, I spent long, reflective hours wandering along frozen trails and sitting by a crackling fire in a rustic cabin. The solitude allowed me to confront the full weight of my emotions. In that isolated landscape, I felt the ache of betrayal slowly soften into a quiet resolve. I understood that while I could never forget the hurt, I could choose to let it guide me toward a future where I was free from the lies that had once dominated my life. The majestic stillness of the mountains became a metaphor for my own inner journey, a journey toward reclaiming my strength, one measured step at a time. Upon returning home, I felt both physically and emotionally exhausted, but also strangely empowered. I began to draft a personal manifesto, a detailed plan outlining the steps I would take to rebuild my life from the ground up. I set clear, achievable goals for my career, my finances, and my personal growth. I vowed to invest in my education, to nurture my creative passions, and to forge new, authentic relationships with those who valued honesty over pretense. Each goal was a brick in the new foundation I was constructing, a future where my worth would no longer be dictated by the betrayals of the past. One evening, as I sat at my desk under the gentle glow of a desk lamp, I composed an email to a select group of close friends and mentors, sharing my decision to start fresh. I explained how I had filed for divorce and how I was determined to build a life that honored my truth. Their responses, filled with encouragement and support, bolstered my spirit and reminded me that I was not defined by this painful chapter. Every message was a quiet celebration of resilience, a reaffirmation that, despite the heartache, I had the power to rebuild my life. That night, as I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights shimmering against the winter sky, I felt a deep sense of both loss and liberation. I understood that the road ahead would be challenging, there would be moments of loneliness, of revisiting old wounds, and of confronting the raw, unhealed parts of my soul. But I also knew that every challenge was an opportunity to grow stronger, to redefine who I was, and to claim a future that was unequivocally my own. In the final hours before dawn, I wrote one last entry in my journal, a testament to the journey from betrayal to rebirth. I wrote of the pain, the anger, and the bitter taste of deceit, but also of the quiet moments of clarity and the gentle reassurance that came with each new day. I vowed that I would never allow the lies of the past to dim the brightness of my future. With each word, I felt the chains of betrayal loosen, replaced by the promise of freedom and the determination to live authentically. Now, as the first light of a new day creeps over the horizon, I stand on the precipice of a future reimagined, a future where my identity is no longer defined by the deceit of others, but by the strength I have cultivated in the crucible of betrayal. I have reclaimed my self-worth, and with every step I take, I honor the journey that has led me here. The scars of my past remain as solemn reminders of what I have endured, yet they have also become symbols of my resilience, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest moments, there is always a spark of hope waiting to ignite a new beginning. With a heart both heavy with memory and lightened by hope, I step forward into this uncharted future. I will rebuild my life one brick at a time, by investing in my dreams, by forging new relationships grounded in honesty, and by embracing the endless possibilities that lie ahead. I am no longer defined by the betrayal that tore my world apart. I am defined by the courage to rise, the determination to rebuild, and the unbreakable spirit that now guides me toward a future filled with promise, integrity, and the unwavering belief that I deserve nothing less than a life lived in truth.